Welcome to the international webinar on contemporary world theatres, organized by the Center for Performance Research and Cultural Studies in South Asia. The inaugural session of the international webinar is by Professor Richard Schechner, eminent director, theatre researcher, emeritus professor, and the editor of TDR, the illustrious Journal of Performance Studies. Celebrated academic and intellectual, Richard Schechner's endeavors have radically redefined contemporary theatre and performance research in a multiplicity of ways. He has conducted extensive research and workshops all over the world, and his works, including the legendary performance theory, have been translated into 18 languages around the world. In the upcoming inaugural session of the webinar, Professor Richard Schechner will inaugurate with a discussion on contemporary theatre and performance with Dr. C.S. Biju. Professor P.J. Thomas, the program coordinator of CPraxis, will introduce Richard Schechner. Thank you.
Morning, Professor Schechner, and good evening, all the distinguished participants. I'm very sure that this audience doesn't need any introduction of Professor Schechner. As we all know that we are in the new order of things. We actually live in the midst of difficult issues and problems. So at the outset, I want to greet you with peace and health. And I know that you're all eagerly waiting to listen to Professor Schechner. So I don't want to be in the way of that. So in one sentence, I want to welcome all the distinguished participants to this webinar, especially to the first lecture and the inaugural lecture. And this is going to be like a Q&A, and which is going to be very democratic and very participatory in nature, and that is what Professor Schechner always stands for. And regarding the introduction of Professor Schechner, I just want to say only one thing, that I have found Professor Schechner to be a Janus-faced scholar, who has his one face towards the west and the other face towards the east. So he, in a way, I mean, in fact, I had the opportunity to participate in one of his workshops, but I must confess that my expertise in this field is very limited. However, I had that golden opportunity to participate in his workshop, and he's always someone who tests the limits of performance, knowledge, and the order of things. So in that workshop, I still remember that one of the participants, swooned by listening to, by watching one of the performances that he has presented for the participants. So anyway, without much ado, I just want to say that I'm honored, and it's my delight to welcome Professor Schechner to this inaugural lecture. And I don't think I need to present before you all the facts, but I just want to mention that he is currently involved in two projects, and that is editor of Enactment series by Siegel and editor of World Performance series by Routledge. Just to let all the scholars like us know that even being a professor emeritus, he is still active in his field, and his brain is so sharp, and therefore he is the best person to talk about performance and theater in this COVID times. Therefore, I welcome Professor Schechner with that love and affection and tremendous respect. Over to Professor Schechner. Thank you again. Nice to meet you in the virtual world again.
Thank you. I just want to say a few very brief things. It's good that you noticed what I'm doing. My main occupation at the present moment is the editing of TDR, the drama review. So that is very active. Of course, the Enactments series that you mentioned at Siegel Press from Kolkata but TDR is a quarterly, and I welcome anybody to go online and check it out. TDR, the Journal of Performance Studies, and that's something that I'm doing most actively. I thank Thomas, I thank the organizers, I welcome anyone who can see me. I'm sitting here in New York City. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, as you well know, in India. I believe India and the United States, perhaps joined by Brazil, are the three places where this virus is most extensive. So I don't have to remind you of that. And it has conditioned our lives and has made us think, made me think, and a lot of other people think in ways that one would not have thought probable maybe 2 years ago. At any rate, I'm glad to participate in this webinar. I've done several of these over the past few months. The reason I do it this way and not by delivering a lecture, I'm capable of delivering a lecture. I could have a text, I could read it, I could show things. But I think one of the advantages of a webinar is that our faces are visible to each other. We exist in a kind of paradoxical time. We exist at different times at the same time. It's morning here, it's evening in India. If you're in Europe, it's midday. If you're in Latin America, it's the same time as in New York. So we're at different times, but at the same time. This kind of technology, which would allow for this kind of immediate contact, simultaneous contact among people in various parts of the world, was literally impossible 50 years ago, very recently. And it conditions us so that along with a pandemic of disease, we have a pandemic of communication. And I think that pandemic we should celebrate, just as the pandemic of disease we should deal with and perhaps fear. The two are related, of course. Were it not for communication, were it not for transportation, the virus would not be able to travel. It's also interesting that the word virus has a meaning in the virtual world as well as in the medical world. Obviously, we know what it means in the medical world. It means an infection. But virus on the web means an idea, or sometimes good, sometimes bad, an idea you may agree with, that you don't agree with, gets dispersed without control, out of control. So when something goes viral on the internet, it means that many people, maybe everyone in the world, if they wish to, who has a virtual connection, can see and hear that piece of information. That's both marvelous and dangerous. So virus has this double meaning, and I think we should keep it in mind. With that, I will turn it over to whoever is going to ask me the questions. Hopefully I will deal with them, but I would welcome, to some degree, dialogue right from the beginning. I realize there are a set of questions, and I'll be doing some talking, but if people want to interrupt, if the moderator will allow them, we should have some dialogue right from the beginning, something that this format allows us to do that if we were meeting face-to-face would be much more difficult to do. So without further ado, I turn it back to Bijou or whoever is going to ask me the questions, and we'll go from there.
Hi. Thank you, Professor Schechner. This is the inaugural session of the 5-session series webinar on contemporary world theaters, and it's a wonderful privilege that a doyen of contemporary theater and performance studies, Professor Schechner, is with us. And at this moment, I would like to pay homage to a wonderful soul who left us 2 months back, Philip Sarilli, who was an exponent of intercultural theater and a long friend of C Praxis, and of course, a teacher of Srijit Ramanan, one of the coordinators of this program. We have two technical coordinators, Adul AK of School of Drama and Parshadi. They serve as the technical coordinators, and Abhishek also is the Zoom coordinator. TDR's forum after COVID what? Let's begin. I'm just trying to invite participants to raise questions. After two or three questions we have collected from our participants, I will invite participants to go on with their own ideas and questions directly to Professor Schechner. In the TDR forum on after COVID-19 vote, is a brilliant effort to collect the responses from artists and creative spirits all over the world. And at the wake of the COVID, at the beginning, almost all major thinkers, Slavoj Zizek, Giorgio Agamben, Judith Butler, all they have brought in with their own idea, came up with their own ideas, but most of them were so pessimistic about the future of creative life, society, community, etc. But the concluding remarks on the forum on after COVID, Richard Schechner, unaffected with the fear of COVID, described this as one moment among many, which also include changes. And he initiated plenty of hope and referred it as a time to think. Professor Schechner, what are the possible ways of being optimistic about the future of theatre during COVID and after COVID?
Yes. Well, let's separate two concepts, hope and optimism. So optimism is saying things will be well. Hope is proposing that perhaps things will be well. My feeling is that, first of all, if we take a long view, this plague, this pandemic, is one of many that has afflicted humans over time. Again, because we have the internet, because we have instant communication, we know what's happening, and we, to some degree, empathize with what's happening elsewhere. I know that there are millions of cases in India, that you know that there are millions of cases in the United States, that what's happening in Europe is coming to a new surge, et cetera, et cetera. 100 years ago or 200 years ago, similar plagues would occur, but we would not know about them. So we would not fear them in a certain way. It's there's an old adage called ignorance is bliss. It's true, ignorance is bliss. There's one of the stories, myths about Prometheus. And he was asked, why have you been chained to the rock? Was it because you gave to humankind the gift of fire? He says in one of these variations, no, that wasn't the main thing. The main thing that I gave to humans was taking away from them the knowledge of the exact date of their death. Now think about that. The story is that before this gift, everyone when they were born had the day of their death written, and they knew it. They knew exactly when they were going to die. So even when they were 10 years old or 12 years old, they knew that the next year they would die, or in 50 years they would die. So they were always haunted by the fear of their death. So Prometheus took away that knowledge, giving us the ability to live in the illusion of immortality, the illusion that I don't know when I'm going to die, and I believe I will never die. Now, in the epoch of the internet, we all, to some degree, have the knowledge of the days of our death, the days of our death of our civilization. We fear the future because we know so much about it. But dying is not new, and dying by plague is not new. In the great bubonic plague of Europe, 1/3 of the whole population died. Not, not that what's happening now is not terrible, but imagine if we had a similar plague at this present moment, and out of the roughly 6 billion people on the earth, 2 billion would die, rather than a terrible thing, the millions that have died. We continue to have plagues that we don't pay attention to that much. In sub-Saharan Africa, we have simple things like diarrhea, dysentery. We have malaria. You have malaria in India. You have malaria in Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So these fearful things are always with us. This one is compounded by the fact that we know about it, that it actually took a root in, after China, it went into Europe, into the global north. So it's knitted into colonialism and post-colonialism. Do you think we would be paying quite so much attention to this if no one in the United States, if no one in Western Europe suffered this disease? No, I don't think we'd be paying so much attention to it. So it's a function, it's a political disease, as well as it being a medical, a biological disease. Because as I noted, hundreds of thousands of people die of malaria every year. Hundreds of thousands of people die of dysentery. I don't know what the toll is in India, but it must be high among certain populations. So part of this is that this particular pandemic is a pandemic. It's gone all over the world, but particularly it's got to the centers of post-colonialism. It's gotten into Western Europe, and it's gotten, of course, China, where it began, is an emerging power, and it's gotten into the United States and North America. Okay, so I am hopeful at 2 or 3 different levels. I am hopeful because sooner or later the disease will, if not pass, it will be absorbed. In other words, it will be something that we deal with. We will have a vaccine for it, or we will live with it in one way or another. I am much more fearful of climate change. I look at this pandemic as a kind of rehearsal for climate change. And it's an interesting rehearsal because the pandemic came, and almost instantly in historical time, people from different nations, from different cultures, were able to coordinate to try to develop this vaccine, to take steps, to learn to lock down, to handle it. We haven't controlled it, but we've had a system. So I ask myself, why isn't such mobilization occurring in relation to climate change? We are kind of rehearsing that. We know that we can do it, but why don't we have the same urgency? The answer is because, again, this Promethean myth about taking away the knowledge of the day of our death. In the climate change, the horizon of time is too long for most people, and certainly politicians, to really grasp. If I say to you, you're sick, and if you don't do something, tomorrow or the next day you will die, or your loved one will die, or your child is ill, do something. But if I say to you, look, in 50 years, of these things you're enjoying, your city life, your education, it will be overcome step by step. You know the story of the boiling of the frog. You put it in the water and you turn up the heat little by little. They don't notice it until it's boiling and it's dead. So that's climate change. Climate change is coming slowly, but it's coming. And so that one of my hopeful lessons, or I cling to hope, is that we will use this pandemic as a model for mobilizing against this larger tsunami, if you will, which is coming in our direction, which will see Dhaka in Bangladesh underwater, which will see Florida, large portions of it go away, which will see New York City, where I'm sitting, probably not underwater because we'll build huge seawalls as they do in Amsterdam. But many of the places in the, again, global south will suffer from this. Okay, now to be a little more local about performance. What has been happening is that people have found ways to perform at distance, but that's a paradox because the theater and other contact arts, let's say dance, music, Music is a little bit special because the digitized music that can be recorded, that can be put on a CD or completely digital is primary. But in dance and theater particularly, the primary experience is coming together in a group to watch or participate with another group. So although we are able to perform at distance, it is a certain core heart of that kind of performance has been ripped from us, which is the social contact, is the feeling of being together. However, I know one way or another, within the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, like this, in terms of the expanse of the thousands, hundreds of thousands of years the human species has been on the planet, and the even longer period that life has been on the planet, we will be able to assemble again. And we will be able to enjoy performance, and we will bring with us some of what we've learned during this period. That is, some of how to do certain kind of distancing, how to integrate digital media and live performance. So I think when the live performance in actual assembly returns again, we will be better for it. The performances will be better for it. Now, I'm not trying to minimize the pain, the death, the suffering, the fear, which is as bad as any of the other things that we all have, and the paralysis. But I'm trying to urge a certain long view, and in that long view to say that we will learn from this and we will persevere. And then the question whether part of what we will learn is how to mobilize interculturally, internationally, to deal with the coming climate thing, which is much bigger, much more extensive, much more irreversible soon than the pandemic. We do not have, nor will we have, a vaccine for climate change. We will not have herd immunity for climate change. What we need to have is action to lower and eliminate the use of fossil fuels, to get the world's temperature to peak and go level, to control our population. You know all the problems that bring climate change with us. So at one level, I'm saying, let's learn our lesson. Let, as theater people, see that this is a rehearsal as well as an actual performance, and see what we can take from it.
Absolutely. These are, one second. Absolutely, Professor Schechner, your remarks obviously hopeful, full of hope. That definitely gives us a ray of hope.
And they're full
At the
of
same
caution
time,
as well. Hope and caution, because I'm saying, let us learn. I'm not so confident we will learn, but let us learn. Let's hope that we can learn. So I've written an essay which I'll send out to your participants called Endgame Earth, Clinging to Hope, which is about this very situation. So if you, maybe I'll send it to Bijou and you can distribute it to anyone who's here. It was published in TDR, but I have it as a separate PDF for you all to read.
in connection with, shall I continue?
Yes,
Professor
please.
Schechner?
Yes, and call me Richard. I've been
In connection with,
so long, I'd rather be Richard than professor. I've been professor for 3/4 of a century,
oh,
so you can call me Richard.
in connection with this, the art world, especially theater world, during COVID, in this forum, TTR forum, there are two very interesting remarks. One by Sharon Aronson Lehavi, and said some of the most significant eras in theater history took place in open spaces. In spite of the closed spaces. You also referred about the transformation of performance spaces during COVID and after COVID. And at the same time, Amelia Jones made a very interesting remark on the liveliness. The concept of the live will have shifted forever since a number of enterprising initiatives have taken place live via internet, etc. The question of live was debated over by Peggy Fallan and Philip Oslander for a long while. The context of the discussion on liveliness has abruptly shifted to another dimension and plane.
Yes.
What would be the possibilities of liveliness, the dimensions of liveliness in theater and performance?
Well, we're not going to end liveliness. The challenge to liveness came with the invention of photography and film. In other words, when that happened, 150 years ago, and not simply photography, but then film, motion pictures, cinematography, etc. People thought that that was the end of theater, right? Because here you could actually use camera angles, you could tell stories, you could distribute it. And that's true. There's no doubt that more people see film than see live theater. But what I did, part of what I did and my colleagues, was to talk about performance rather than theater. If theater as a subcategory of performance, in other words, if theater as something that by and large happens inside rooms in certain countries, performance is much broader. Performance happens in public spaces. Performance happens in religious festivals. Performance happens in offices. Performance is happening now. So that the question is not simply one of liveness. Film is truly not live because once it's been put into the can, as it were, once it's made in a film and it's a digital file, that is a digital reality. If you're doing live camera work, it is still live. What we're doing right now is live. It's live at a distance. If you're recording this and somebody watches this webinar next week or whenever, it'll no longer be live. So liveness and digitization are compatible, although when you reproduce the digital version, it's no longer live. What Peggy Fallon and Philip Auslander were debating, where I also got involved in that debate, is not simply liveness, but face-to-faceness. Face-to-faceness, let's call it touch. So that what happens, the real question about liveness in performance is a question of involving the senses beyond sight and sound. So we're live, but I can't smell you. I can't, let's take distance. So sight can go billions of miles, right? We have telescopes that can look out, light years, billions of miles. Through our technology, sound also travels quite far, like you can hear me, but we can't put sound out into interstellar space. Perhaps we can put signals that then may be converted back into space, but sound doesn't have the distance that sight has. Sight is the longest distance thing. But then we get smell is next. It can go further than touch. But smell is also very, very limited in relationship to sight or sound. Then comes touch. And touch is, literally the distance of my arms and legs and limbs. And most intimate is taste. Now, this brings me to a very interesting Indian performance theory. I assume that most of you who are Indian know about Bharata's Natya Shastra. And if you know about the Natya Shastra, then you know about the 6th chapter of the Natya Shastra, which is about rasa. And rasa is specifically the aesthetic of taste or flavor. And I don't want to go into a big disquisition here about rasa theory. Although, again, there's another essay of mine called Rasa Aesthetics. I'd be very glad to send it to you. You can read it. And another person who passed recently, Philip Zerilli, was very dear to me, and I was literally speaking with him a few days before he passed, one of the last people, and he and I worked together quite a lot. But another person who passed recently is Kapila Vatsyayan, who is an expert on the Natya Shastra, a scholar in Delhi, and some of you may know her. At any rate, rasa is the theory that aesthetics is connected to flavor and taste. In other words, to the intimate, the most intimate of the senses, the sense that is both internal and external. Literally, to taste something, you have to take it into your body. You have to get it into your mouth. So that to see something, you can see at a distance. To hear it, you can do it. But there's been no way to digitize taste, where you can put something on and actually taste it. Perhaps we'll get there sometime. So to me, the question of liveness is the question of re-engaging, again, closeness, so that we can feel the body heat next to us. We can smell the people next to us, even though if we're not aware of it. And if we wish to, we can actually taste them. That's why so many religious festivals and religious observances where people are deeply engaged in participating in the performance involve communion, involve eating, whether it's prasad at a puja in India, or it's the communion of the Roman Catholic Church, or the Jewish Seder, where the meal is the center of it, or Ramadan, where you fast and then eat, so that the tension between not tasting and tasting is very, very extreme. This expanded view of not simply when is theater coming back, when will we be able to stage plays, but when will we be able to involve the performance energy of taste and smell and touch, in addition to seeing and hearing. So the digital media can give us eyes and ears, but they can't give us nose and fingers and taste. And that, I think, will, first of all, it continues, obviously. Here in New York, where we're shutting down, one of the things that people miss most are restaurants and parties and getting together. That's where it's hardest to control people. People will go a long way to be able to share that kind of sociability. So I have worked for many years to develop aesthetics, to develop rasic aesthetics in terms of rasa literally means juice and sweet and that kind of sense of things. And I do think that that impulse is so strong that virus or no virus, it will persist. It will come back. We are not first of all, to reproduce, we have to taste and touch each other. We don't, we're not going to go to a world of in vitro fertilization for everyone. We're still going to be making love. We're still going to be touching and tasting. And I don't know how, whether the birth rate has gone down during the pandemic. That would be a really interesting statistic, whether fewer women are getting pregnant these days. My guess would be not much. That somehow that kind of deep intimacy, literally penetration, literally embrace, continues even in these days. So it's and for me, it's not just a question of theater. It's a question of performance. It's a question of seeing how theater is a distillation of this kind of more extensive kinds of performance. So I don't. It's again where my hope is we will persist if our species survives. And I think climate change and the destruction of the environment, the destruction of other species, the regarding that the human species is an invasive species, these are the huge issues that I think threaten not simply ourselves, but Gaia, but the earth itself. Again, when I think of Indian religion, Hindu religion, and the embodiment of the goddess and of earth, there's where the true existential threats are. But if the species learns to survive, if the humans learn to survive, and if we learn to share this world with other species and respect these other species and love and embrace them, then certainly we'll perform face to face. We'll perform obviously socially face to face, sexually, romantically, but also we'll learn to perform back in this kind of arena. One of the Indian performances I've studied most is the Ram Leela, especially the Ram Leela of Ramnagar. Now, again, there are many, many Ram Leelas. They're celebrated, especially in North India, where the Ram Charitmanas of Tulsidas is, but the Ram Leelas are celebrated all over, and the story of Ram is told all over. I just a few days ago saw a version of the Mahabharata in Tamil Nadu, a film of it about Draupadi, and this Draupadi, she is Ram's sister, which I'd never heard of before. It's really quite amazing to have her, Draupadi, sing the story of Ram. But part of the story of Ram, which connects to the COVID crisis, is the exile. So leaving out all of the problems with Ram, all of the problems with Hindutva, all of that, I mean, I'm aware of those things. I'm just saying that so we could discuss it, but I'm not. Think of the basic narrative. For Ram to fulfill his karma, for him to save the earth, he has to go into exile. But where does he go? He goes into the forest, and he lives off of fruits and berries. In other words, he gives up fossil fuels, let's say that. Ayodhya to him and the palace of Dasarat is kind of fossil fuels. He accepts that he has to live with and among nature in the forest. And it's in the forest that who are his allies? Monkeys and bears. In other words, one can, of course, these great myths talk to us across thousands of years, and we can interpret them in different ways. So one of the ways I would like to interpret the Ram story at this moment is that Ram is able to engage with nature. He is able to see that nature, monkeys and bears, are his main allies. His enemy is Ravan, who is superhuman. He's got 10 heads, 20 arms. He's against nature in a certain way. So that one can interpret the myth as Ravan being a kind of the mad scientist or the hyperhuman, and Ram being back to nature. No, not so many fossil fuels. What do the bears have to offer? What do the monkeys have to offer? What does Hanuman, with his great heart of love and empathy, have to offer, and so on? Again, I know the complexity of this story. I know it means a lot more, but I'm saying that we can learn from these stories and come to terms with with what is facing us. And part of that will be to come back face to face within touch and taste difference and to perform. We will not give this up. We cannot give this up. If we give this up, we will also give up sexual reproduction, and we'll go away. I mean, it'll only take a generation. Let's all of us renounce sex, and we only have to wait one generation. There won't be any people. But we're not going to do that. And I feel that this live performance, as engaged in eating, sharing, telling stories together, singing, dancing, is inherent in who we are. So that, again, I fear the virus. I take care of myself. I'm an older person. I know that if I were to catch it, it would possibly be fatal for me. At the same time, I am looking towards re-engagement. And I'm not looking to find ways to replace theater. Again, once theater survived, theater and dance survived film, it can survive anything. And why does theater do that? Because first of all, you can make theater among small groups. in New York before the virus, there were hundreds and hundreds of little theaters. I'm sure that's also true in India and in other parts of the world. And these come back. And so I am hopeful that will occur. It will occur through the intervention of science. We'll get a vaccine, or it'll occur in some way, finding ways to go on with life, even with this plague among us, just as malaria and the mosquito has not stopped us, and dysentery and bad water has not stopped us. We want to end the mosquito. We want to end the bad water. But at the same time, we want to continue our lives.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's the answer I have.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely, this is another dimension of liveliness and what sort of live theater we are all going to meet with.
In other words, just to say a little bit, I don't agree with Amelia, who I deeply respect, to say that it's changed forever. I think, human life has a way of looping. Again, the Ram story. He goes into exile, he has his adventures, he meets Robin, and he returns. There's a loop, so that we have a way, if we, and when you get older, as I've gotten older, you feel these rhythms. You see the rhythm of living, of life, beyond my own individual life. As you get older, either you go into despair or you gain some kind of wisdom that one's own individual life is not all there is, and that there is a rhythm, and that we return to this rhythm. As I said, though, earlier, the existential threat is the threat not only in climate change, but what climate change represents. Climate change represents disrespect for the earth and the other species. It shows that we are exploiting the earth in ways that are unsustainable for not simply ourselves, but for the biosphere, for other species. I think that life on Earth will not stop. Human life on Earth may stop. The life of large mammals may stop. We've had that before. The great extinction of 65 million years ago knocked out 95% of life, including the dinosaurs, et cetera, et cetera. So we have certain choices to make. I think we are the asteroid. The question is, will we learn to dismantle ourselves, or will we crash? We are the asteroid.
Yes. This voice, we have listened to political thinkers, philosophers, social scientists, and economists recently about the kind of permanent changes took place structurally, ideologically, economically at all levels. But Schechner is bringing to the focus another dimension of the crisis. I believe this is a very important voice of dissent to the majoritarian, the dominant voices of pessimism, which is dominating our thought, even our thought process. Now, I believe after this, I'm very happy to invite participants to raise questions. And is that okay, Schechner?
Yeah, anything you want to do.
Yeah.
Again, you had some questions about my own artwork, or here I've kind of ranged from the Natya Shastra to an asteroid. So yeah, that's what I like about this kind of interaction, that we're not bound to a small text, but we can actually explore what being together at a distance can offer us.
Okay, we have some of the participants have sent their questions already. May I invite Rith Chattopadhyay is here? Rith, if you are here, you can, or is it possible you can definitely raise your question to Schechner?
Richard.
Yes, Richard.
You can go
because
Richard if you'd like.
but I used to call you through our emails, Schechner for long years, almost 20 years. That's why I cannot change. Sorry.
Schechner is good. I like it. I share it with a whole group.
Rith's question. Yeah, Rith, you can raise your hand, then get unmuted. Then you can ask the question directly. Abhishek, can you please unmute Rith Chattopadhyay?
I can only see a Rid here. I think I have unmuted him.
Okay, if it's not possible, I'll read the question.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Schechner. It's a pleasure to hear you speak and to talk to you. My question is regarding Edward Bond. So I'll read out my question. There are a few dramatists who have witnessed both the Great Wars and the COVID crisis. And Edward Bond is one such playwright, and he's still writing. During my conversations with Edward and my research, I have found that Edward is not only devising new theatrical techniques like the invisible object, triple brain theater event, a term that you have already used and talked about in your books. But he is also currently reacting to our crisis through a trilogy called the Crisis Trilogy.
To what? I didn't catch you. He compared the crisis to what?
He is writing a trilogy called the Crisis Trilogy.
Okay.
So the first two plays are Dia and the Shoe Thief, and he's writing the third. So I wanted to know where and how do you see Bond affecting or shaping contemporary theater, and what do you think of his recent plays?
I do not know them, so I have no opinion. I'm sorry, but I know Edward Bond and Saved and so on. I do not know this trilogy, either 1, 2, or 3, so I have no comment on it.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. Now, Geetanjali Kalanad. Geeta, can you hear me?
And it says here on my
Geeta,
screen that Supanta Bhattacharya Nagpur has raised a hand also. I'm reading what I see on my screen.
yeah, you can see the questions in the chat, put in the chat box, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Hello.
Geeta,
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Who am I speaking to?
I'm Supant Bhattacharya.
Okay.
Professor Schechner, you had once written that plays should be wrought rather than written.
Correct.
Yeah. So, in this post-COVID scenario, how would this work out? How would a playwright, how would his works be wrought? Shakespeare, you had written that he kind of worked closely with London's burgeoning theatrical companies. Yeah. So, in the post-COVID scenario, how is a playwright going to kind of change his writing approach?
Okay. Let me explain that concept because not everyone will know it. So in English, again, I don't know about all languages, but in English, the word playwright is spelled P-L-A-Y, playwright, W-R-I-G-H-T. It is not spelled P-L-A-Y-W-R-I-T-E-R. Now, the word right, W-R-I-G-H-T, is like plowright. That is also in English. It means a craftsman of something. A plowright is someone who knows how to use a plow. A playwright, in that sense, is not someone who writes a play in some room and then brings it in to be performed. That's the way modern theater works. But in the Elizabethan era, in England, especially, I believe, with Shakespeare, the playwright was a WRIGHT. The playwright worked with a group of performers, and in a certain way, perhaps they improvised or he constructed texts and scenarios with them. We know that Shakespeare had certain actors, and like Kemp the Clown and other actors that he wrote specific kinds of things for. Now, I have experience with that. When I ran the performance group, I had people like Stephen Borst and Spalding Gray and Elizabeth LeConte, Ron Vorder. And when we did our texts, we worked on them, and also since then an East Coast artist, we worked and made the texts in relationship to the actions. In other words, the actions in a certain sense looked for a text rather than the usual way where you have the text and you bring the actor to it, rather than take from a storehouse of possible texts or things you invent what you're going to put on to the stage. Now, the way of writing, or as you would say, writing with a WRIGHT, a play, a performance, does take this kind of close-in connection. So what I'm foreseeing is that we're not permanently going to be sitting in our rooms. We're not permanently going to be at distance. We will learn, we will continue to have webinars. They're very good ideas. And that's a very powerful way of communicating and teaching, especially interculturally, especially across time and space barriers. But in addition to that, we will have this face-to-face creativity. In other words, the invention of restaurants did not stop cooking at home.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
What we know about human culture is that it is additive. Very few things do we totally give up. Even horses, in the places where people drive cars, they still race horses. They love horses. They ride horses. So we don't tend to give things up. They tend to find niches. So live performance will be it will be a widespread niche of some live performance here, some here, all over the place. While media, what we're doing is the more global overarching thing. So think of it, if you wanted to in terms of commerce. You have Amazon, but you also have the neighborhood store. So you need to have, it works both ways. So I think that certain groups, as the performance group did, as the open theater did, as the living theater, these are American groups, but as Badal Shirkar, who I worked with in Kolkata.
Third theater.
Yes, third theater, but I'm saying he worked with his group, Shatabdi, to
Shatabdi.
make performances. He started out as a playwright, Writer. He wrote plays, Evrem Idrajit, etc., his most famous play. But then he started to work with the actors to make their own kind of plays, and took them into streets. Augusto Boal and the Theater of the Oppressed. So it's not that we give up writing. Edward Bond will still write his plays. I haven't read this trilogy. He will write plays, and many people will write plays in the writing sense. But other people will come together in groups to develop performances, and that will continue. Now, in theater, that is not as widespread as in dance. Very often in dance, it's not anymore a single choreographer. It's like in contact improvisation. It's a group of people who are making movement together. And so that, one of the statements of Mao Zedong that I do appreciate, there are certain problems with Mao, but you learn different things, is let 100 flowers bloom, he said at one point, when asked about, diversifying. Then they cut a lot of those flowers, yes. But the notion of letting 100 flowers bloom, of diversity, of not thinking my way and your way eliminate, but my way plus your way, plus her way, plus another way. Let's have that kind of diversity it's very good ecologically to have diversity, to have genetic diversity, and it's very good culturally, and it's very good aesthetically.
So, sir, you don't foresee a future where, theater would be individually streamed like cinema is these days?
where, say that again, please. I didn't quite hear you.
Cinema today is, rather than theatrical collective experience, it has become individualized thanks to all these platforms, various online platforms that we
I
have.
think, yes. First of all, I think that sooner rather than later, we're going back to movie theaters. I don't think they're going to be going away any more than restaurants are going away. So that we will stream, but we
Right.
will also come together. In
Okay.
other words, it hasn't happened that television, for example, has stopped live theater. I think before the COVID, there was more small theaters going on within a couple of kilometers of where I live than ever before. And yet people did have large cineplexes with many screens. They did have television and very large screens in their homes. So it's a multiplicity. It's not, things don't tend to go away in these fields, and there's a lot of flow back and forth. So yes, we will stream performances, but performances streamed still are two-dimensional, and they dominate with the eye and the ear, and you don't have the chance for the interaction. Anyone who has ever been on a stage as a lecturer, as a performer, in a room, knows that you get energy, you get involvement from the people that are there, and that it changes the tone of how you're performing. Even if you're performing an established, highly scored script, even if you're doing the same thing night after night, like in a Broadway play, the audience reaction, the audience
But
involvement.
will this happen in theater ever?
What happened in theater? Will what happen?
Will we ever have, an on-demand kind of theater?
I think we will have some on-demand kind of theater, but we'll also have theater in person. I don't see the two as canceling each other out. I don't see them as either or, because I think that the experience, collective experience, is very important to the theatrical experience. But we will have on-demand theater. Yes, we will have some of that, and we will have theater that is being broadcast like sports at the same time as there's an audience. Now, sports is an interesting analogy. So what happens now, increasingly, is that there are people in the stadium, but there are millions of people watching not in the stadium. But the two interact. The energy of the stadium is part of what gets pushed out through the media. And now that we have in the United States sports without spectators, they set up little signs of spectators in the stadium, and they play the crowd noise, fake crowd noise to make it feel
Yes.
like people there.
We have the IPL.
So I think that what will happen with the theater is that, of course, it will be live streamed, but it will also have the audience there. The two are not contradictory. We have a large population. Part of our job as theater people is to get more and more people to attend one way or the other. Live
True.
stream, in person. We still have hundreds of millions of people who don't get to the theater. They do, however, get to performance. They do go to religious observances, which are highly theatrical. They do go to family gatherings. They do go to parties. All of these things are performative. I have a book that I recommend to you. It's in English. It's called Performance Studies and Introduction. It's published by Routledge. It's also online. It really goes into these theories in some detail, including ritual and play and performance in the ancient Paleolithic times, 20, 30,000 years ago, long before the Greeks, long before Kalidasa. So I recommend that book to you. If you are interested in what I'm saying now, you should look at that book and some of the things I say in there.
Yeah. The next question.
I have a related question. Could I ask that now? Is that all right?
May I know who is speaking, please?
This is Vimal from SB College.
Vimal, please.
Yeah. So thank you, Richard, for that talk. I have put a question in the chat as well, but let me not go into that now. This is regarding the idea of streamed performances. When Hamilton came out, I was very sad that I could not get to watch Hamilton. I'm talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical.
Yes, I've seen it. Yes.
So now I understand that it's being streamed live.
It has. That's how I've seen it. I've not
Right.
seen it on Broadway. I've seen it streamed.
Okay, so do you think there is something that is irrevocably lost when we do change Hamilton from a live performance into a streamed performance?
No, I don't think it's lost. I think it's different. You know, I'm talking to all of you people, and you're talking to me. Now, let me ask you a question. Had I given a formal lecture and then had questions on the lecture, would you be as engaged? Probably not, I think. I think this format allows us to engage, but it doesn't eliminate those who want to give a lecture or those who want to listen to it. At the same time, were we in the same room together? Or were we in a cafe and I would have a cup of coffee and you would have a cup of coffee. There'd just be 5 of us. There are multiple ways of exchanging information, ideas, feelings, and so on. So I think we should not think of either or, this or that. We should think of and, diversity and so on. So watching Hamilton streamed, it was very good. And seeing Miranda perform was excellent. One performance I saw live at the same, roughly the same time. I never saw Hamilton live. I didn't want to pay all that money and they weren't giving me a free ticket. So I just didn't see it live. But I did see Hadestown because Rachel Chavkin, the director, I know her. I knew her when she was a student. And also I've done an interview with her that is about to come out in TDR about Hadestown. Now, the experience of being in the theater and being close, of having those other people next to me also watching, of literally, seeing, of course it's dangerous now, but seeing the spray of aerosol come out of the singer's mouth, that was exciting. That you can't get by watching it streamed or filmed. But the streamed and the film version is its own kind of experience. It allows you even more to get a kind of Brechtian, if you will, distance, to be alienated from the performance. So we are now involved, all of us, in having this discussion, and we are close. I can see your face. That's one thing that streaming does that we can't do in an auditorium. I mean, I can see Gitanali's iPad and Sanjoy Datta there, et cetera. I can see your name, Sandeep Kumar. Hi, Sandeep. So we can see faces and so on. This technology allows that if we were in a lecture hall, I might know that Sandeep was out there, but he'd be tiny. So each medium has its own advantages, has its own disadvantages. And so what I'm asking is for a celebration of diversity, for taking advantage of what something has. Now, streaming, I like the idea of streaming because it can come out, bring Hamilton to thousands of people. And it can lower if you can't pay all that money to see it in person, it's of course better to see it streaming than to not see it at all. It would be best if it were free, but we live in a highly commercialized world. It's not going to be free on Broadway, and even streaming probably costs you a few bucks. But that's good. It's not the same. If I'm given a choice, most probably I would choose to see it live. At the same time, it's less convenient. If I'm going to stream Hamilton, I can do it at any time. I can do it sitting in my pajamas. I can do it naked. Doesn't matter. If I'm going to go to Broadway, I not only buy the ticket, but I have to get ready for the occasion. I've got to dress. I've got to get there. So there are advantages and disadvantages. What I'm asking for, what I'm imploring, is that we celebrate the diversity and the opportunities rather than going either this or that. I think that, ideal Marxism hasn't really worked out, but it does work out when in the media world, when you can have from each according to her needs, and to each from each according to her abilities, and to each according to her needs, much more in an e-world than you can in the actual world. So we should enjoy it at that point, insofar as we can. So to answer in a word, I enjoyed seeing Hamilton streamed. I personally would have preferred, enjoyed it probably even more had I seen it live.
Yeah. The next question, please. Yes.
Sir, can I ask one question?
I'm not the moderator, so whoever wants to ask, please ask.
Hello, sir.
May I know who is speaking, please?
I am Bhaktavatsala Bharati from Pondicherry, South India.
Oh, I had a
Okay,
good
please
time
carry
in
on.
Pondicherry.
Okay. Hello, sir. Good evening. Very fascinating lecture. Hello.
Yes?
Good evening, sir. Very fascinating lecture. As an anthropologist, I know that yourself and Professor Victor Turner were good friends academically. Could you explain how far your association enabled Turner to develop his liminality and pilgrimage theories?
Well, Victor and I were very close friends, not just professionally, but personally. I want to say one thing about Pondicherry. You know, Auroville and the mother and Sri Aurobindo are near Pondicherry. And I spent some very important days there with the mother back in the 1970s. So just put that aside in Auroville. So Victor and I worked together from around 1977 until his death 6 years later in 1983. And we developed together, I had a model that preceded Victor Turner. It was like an infinity loop in which not only did art mirror or reflect social life, but I said at the same time social life reflected art, that there was a dynamic relationship between what is represented and what is enacted. And Turner took his notions, that figure very much affected Victor. And one of my essays, again, written before I knew him, was called From Ritual to Theater and Back. And one of his last books had the same title. So he obviously did it. And we worked together a lot. We co-sponsored conferences. We were in each other's company. We enjoyed each other's company. I worked also with his wife, Edith Turner, who survived him and continued to work until her death a few years ago. The notion of liminality, which Turner used, and the notion of communitas, which he developed highly. The notion of liminality he took from Van Gennep, a Dutch anthropologist who lived at the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s. And Van Gennep was the one who said you have a status, a period between statuses, social status, and a new status. And the period between is the liminal period, what Turner called betwixt and between. And I saw in that, because I knew Turner's work before I met him personally, I saw in that liminal phase the model of rehearsal, where you're not yet doing a performance for the public, but you're not just not doing a performance, you're preparing something, you're in between, it's not yet actualized. And so I played with that idea, and he and I had a huge interaction. A lot of that is in several books. I did a book called Between Theater and Anthropology, and Victor wrote I think Victor wrote the introduction to that book. At any rate, there's an essay in it called Restoration of Behavior, which goes into these ideas in some detail. So I don't know exactly what you want to know, but I think I influenced Victor in the sense of helping him see the performative aspect of his theory, and he influenced me in the sense of emphasizing liminality and what he would call spontaneous communitas. He had communitas of different kinds, and that was impacted the idea of communitas he took from the Roman Catholic rite of communion. He was a Roman Catholic, and he believed in that faith, and he certainly believed in that ritual process. I'm not saying he believed in God as some kind of abstract, but he believed in the notion of the ritual process in terms of having people form a unity that goes beyond the individual, that is trans-individual, and is in communitas, in communion with each other. Of course, he saw that nationalism and tribalism and family, these were all forms of communitas. But Turner was more interested in much of his life at what he called aesthetic communitas or spontaneous communitas, communitas that happens when people find each other in groups, interacting, and the boundaries between the individuals get blurred or disappear temporarily, so that you can say, I am you and you are me, rather than just I see you and you see me, that our interactions are more total and intimate. Turner was interested in that. He also, we influence each other in the notion of performance. That is that you prepare, you train, you perform, you do aftermath like what we're doing now, you discuss performances. So right at this moment, I am performing with and for you. When you interact with me, you're performing in response to each other. At the same time, to some degree, I prepared. It's a Sunday morning. I wouldn't be wearing this nice shirt normally at this time, 10:13 on a Sunday morning. I would probably be in a t-shirt or something, but I needed to put on an appropriate costume, if you will, or a presentation of self. So along with Turner, that phrase presentation of self was also influenced by Irving Goffman, who was an anthropologist as well, and wrote a number of books: Frame Analysis, Interaction Ritual, and most particularly The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And I was also influenced by a man named Milton Singer, who wrote about Madras. I mean, before it was Chennai, and about Madrasi culture, and he called that when a great civilization modernizes. So it was about the emergence of cultural performances in Madras, particularly the development of Bharatanatyam, which is an Indian dance, but it's really a modern dance, which kind of mines and takes influences from temple sculptings and ancient dance. It kind of is a complicated history of it, which I discuss in my book, Between Theater and Anthropology. But Singer also was talking about Madrasi culture as performing itself, as inventing itself by performing itself. So all of those things form a kind of nexus, a set of interactions that are very important in the development of my ideas. And to some degree, I was important in the development of Turner's ideas. I didn't influence Singer. I never met him. I did know Irving Goffman. And at one point, Irving Goffman and Turner and I and anthropologist Barbara Myro, we all taught a course together at NYU, a workshop course in the summer. So I knew Irving not as well as I knew Turner. And I knew Turner very, very well. I don't know if that answers your question, Brakavasala.
Yes, yeah. We're waiting for the next question. Please. Those who raised hand, this is Gita.
Oh, okay.
Gitanjali? Yes.
Yeah. Richard, I wanted to ask you whether you can imagine a situation where the audience is trained to experience rasa in online events. For example, you really need to be trained to experience rasa during Kathakali or no performances. In the same way, can you imagine that there's some kind of training or some kind of change in that theatrical experience that would allow the audience to experience rasa online as well?
Okay, let me say, first of all, thank you, Gita, for the question. you can experience rasa without any training. In other words, it's a way of describing what people feel. So I've seen, let's say when I was in Sankat Mochan temple outside of Varanasi, where I lived actually for a while, and what probably very few of you know that I was at one point initiated as Jaya Ganesh. So I'm a Brahmin, heaven help me, but I did, and so I was able to live at temples without violating the ritual prohibitions. And I was good friends with the Mahantji Veerbhadra Mishra, who was the Mahant of Sankat Mochan. At any rate, at Sankat Mochan, while I observed and participated in the pujas that were going on there to the extraordinary Hanuman Murti that is in the temple, those people were experiencing rasa. If I said rasa theory to them, most of them would not know what I was talking about. So you don't need to have, similarly for tragic catharsis, you can experience Aristotle's tragic catharsis without having read Aristotle. So these theories are descriptors, and they help organize experiences that people have. So people are experiencing rasa all the time, very deeply, without having any notion of Bharata's Natya Shastra or the theory of rasa or any of the Avinavi Gupta's writings about it, any of the writings about it. Now, the second thing about whether we can experience rasa this way at some kind of distance, it's very weakened, I would say, very diluted, because rasa is a question, experiencing rasa is a question of deeply shared sensuous experience. Now you can do it perhaps through a picture, because we're a very intelligent species that can absolutely empathize with what we see and feel. But when we're doing that, we're engaging the senses that are not engaged by mirror neuroning them rather than by directly engaging them. And yet I feel that direct engagement is more powerful. I'll give you a rasic experience at a distance that I had, just comes to me now, having in Madras, in Chennai, in 1971, when I saw Bala Saraswati perform. Now, Bala was a great Natyam dancer. When I saw her, she was already older. And I won't, again, for those who don't know her, I won't go into her whole history. But she is a transitional figure from some dances that existed before Bharatanatyam into Bharatanatyam. And she was a master of abhinaya, acting. And she would do it very subtly. I was in the audience. I had not seen this form before, a little bit perhaps, but done more in the, quote, classical way, not in the way that Bala did it, which was extremely in terms of acting. And she was acting out the scene of when Krishna's mother, Krishna puts dirt in his mouth. It's a very famous scene. And Krishna's mother, who she's playing, now Bala in Bharatanatyam, like in Kathakali, you can play multiple roles. At any rate, she says to him, spit it out, spit it out. And she's dancing this thing, abhinaya, she's gesturing it, she's giving mudras, she's doing hand gestures. And no, the boy said, no, no, no. And she's both Krishna and the mother. And finally, she says, no, you must, you must. And he opens his mouth and she goes to take the earth out and she falls back. You still see it. Throws her head back in a trance. So what has happened? She has seen the entire universe in Krishna's mouth, from its creation to its destruction. And she has knowledge. My hair is standing on end just telling it. She has knowledge of all creation. And Bala shows the reaction. And she says, no, no, no. And Krishna, just like I started this lecture by ignorance of Prometheus, Krishna says, I will give you the gift of forgetting what you have seen. and he becomes a little boy again. And she has no memory that she's seen all of creation in the mouth of her child. She only has the little boy who has now spit out the, still brings moisture to my eyes. 81, 91, 01, 11, 21, 50 years ago, 49 years ago. That is rasa at a distance. I'm experiencing it now as I experienced it in an auditorium in Madras in 1971 from a 50-year-old dancer who was showing me the actuality of Krishna through her. You understand, Gita? And it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting that your name is Gita. You know, I think of the Bhagavad Gita. It's the same story, right? Krishna's grown up. He's become a cab driver for Arjun.
Gita worked with Philip. Gita worked with Philip Sarili.
Ah,
She's
well,
the dancer.
as I said, I spoke to Philip 2 days before he passed. He was very
Yeah.
peaceful.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
very, he was a total person.
I attended your workshop too, Richard, in Kerala when you came for Biju's workshop. So it's nice to connect with you online.
Yes, nice to see you too. Where are you at this moment?
Toronto.
Toronto.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Gita. Arpita is there. Arpita Jagulia. Okay, then Priya, we have two more just small questions to, we'll wind up by 9, Richard. What do you think?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's good. I think I've given you your money's worth.
Yeah. Okay, two more questions. Priya Verghese.
Hello, I'm Arpita.
Yes, please.
Hello, sir. Hello, Richard.
Yes, please speak a little louder or speak to your microphone.
Arpita, please carry on.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, this is better.
Okay.
Hi, Priya.
Sir, I'm Arpita. Sir, so regarding my first question, you actually already told, so I wanted to ask about that theatricality. So in the absence of the live bodily performance, how this theatricality is going to be projected. So they already told that we should welcome this diversity. We should welcome this streaming notion of streaming and this. So my regarding to this streaming, my second question is, don't you think it's a hegemonic spectatorship? At least in India, very few limited people have access to internet. So. So what would be your take on this
Yes.
this hegemonic spectatorship?
Yes, I think one of the problems of that kind of hegemony is to cure it at its source. In other words, make sure that more people have access. In other words, in this case, I don't want to say, look, let's not stream, because many people in poverty do not have access to that. I would rather say, let's stream and work hard, give money, energy to give people more access. It's the same with medicine. Let's just say you have a cure for malaria.
Yeah.
And some people are not going to be able to get access to it. Do you then take away the cure for everyone, or do you work to extend the cure so that more and more people can get access to the medicine? When we have the vaccine for coronavirus, it's the question will be not to not give it, but to give it to more and more people, as many as we can. So I also think that internet access is, it's not exactly a human right, but it is close to that. It's a communication right that one should try to extend it. And there are several ways. In villages, It might be that it starts the way they did in China with a village reception. In other words, that people go to a space, 15 or 20 people or whatever, as many at distance, and they can interact. They can go online if you can't get it into each particular home. At any rate, my short answer is that do not stream because some people don't have access, but
Yeah.
work hard to give more and more people access. Because I would look at internet access like I look at food, medicine, clothing, housing, all of these things. You don't say we'll not have any houses because some people live in huts. We want to have more houses so that fewer people live in huts. People are starving. That doesn't mean nobody eats. It means that we want to get food to more and more people. So that's the way I look at this. As for the question of hegemony, I know a little bit about it, of course, and I live a privileged life. I'm aware of that. I'm in a large room. I'm in an apartment. I'm in Manhattan. And I haven't, like Ram, I have not gone into the forest. I have not renounced everything, and nor am I likely to do that. At the same time, I work insofar as I can, like this, in giving what I've got. I'm just a juggler with ideas. So I'll perform my ideas, for you without getting paid for it, trying to extend out as much as much as possible. So that's my, it's not I'm aware of colonialism and post-colonialism, hegemony, and all of those things. But I'm also not a politically correct kind of person. In other words, I have to work from the bottom up, from the people I interact with, the groups I find myself in. Like at this moment, I'm, through Kerala, from New York to Kerala to the world, interacting. So we work to overturn hegemony. Black lives matter. All lives matter. That doesn't mean that Black lives, that systemic racism in the United States needs to be recognized and combated and destroyed insofar as we can, step by step. At the same time, knowing that these systemic things, in India, you have your own kind of problems. I have friends in India who are Muslim, very close associates, who literally live in fear at this moment because of the policies and activities of your government. I study Ram Lila. I know what happened in 1992 in Ayodhya. I know that the Bobre Masjid was built over a Ram temple. And probably the Ram temple was built over something. That's what happens. And one has to deal with these things. In other words, no society is without its deep, deep inequities and problems. And one works to overcome them insofar as one can, step by step, recognizing that, Ramraj, the perfect time, the golden age, we're not going to get to a golden age, but we can make things better step by step, and we ought to. That's, I started this interaction with all of you talking about optimism and hope, the relationship between them. So I am optimistic that through hope and collaboration, we can make a world, not a perfect world. We want a perfect world, but if we will only be happy with a perfect world, we'll never be happy. We have to say the journey in the right direction is what we work towards, and that should make us happy. The pilgrimage, the movement towards a better world.
Yeah, the last question, Priya Varghese.
Yeah, hi Richard, this is Priya Varghese from Mumbai. Like you mentioned about the pandemic of communication, I think this period has given us endless possibilities of understanding, learning, sharing across from theater practitioners and enthusiasts across the globe. So do you think this can lead to more work on the cross culture or interculture sort of work, or is a fear
Sure.
of the unknown holding us back?
No. We are moving, there are many things wrong with globalization. Again, I know that. But I am for globalization. I am for interculturality. I am for movement back and forth. I'm looking at all of these faces here. So, obviously, most of you appear to be South Asian. Are you South Asian? What does it mean to be South Asian? It's a category. It's a category that sometimes we identify with the color of our skin, sometimes we identify with a region, sometimes we identify with a language, and so on and so forth. So but what we try to, and with names, if I see Sanjoy, if I see Priya, that's telling me things. You see Richard, that tells you things. But actually, Richard shouldn't tell you too much because Richard's an Anglo-Saxon name. I'm a Jewish guy, and Richard is not in my family's lineage. They were trying to be fancy, and they named me Richard, and one of my brothers William, and another one Arthur. They did get one David in, but so they were trying to kind of reach up into a world that they didn't quite belong in through naming. So to me, it's both amusing and actual, but I think that as the world proceeds, we are more and more, and not everyone, people still hate each other, but some people love each other. Some people love across these boundaries and communicate across these boundaries. I've been very lucky to have friends who I feel are affectionate towards me, and I'm affectionate towards them in different countries and categories. I would not like to be localized as an American, as a white, as a Jew, as all of that. Those are all part of my categories. And I'm aware of the difficulties they bring, and I'm aware of the privileges that I've had, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, I want to reach out to people. I feel that race, for example, is a construct. It's not real. It's not real biologically, but it is real socially. It is real temporarily. Let's put it that way. I have hopes that in 100 years or so, it will not be real as a social category, that will be a phase we have passed through. I even foresee a time when the world, if we get things under control, will no longer have nations. I'd like that to be a temporary thing. So, I can foresee utopias, and I know that we probably won't reach them, but my inclination is to go towards them. More interaction, more interculturality, more collaboration among and across cultures. So I see that we're in a period now of intense identity politics. Okay, but I look at that as a kind of condition, if not exactly a disease, at least a condition that we will pass through as we learn from it, not permanent. So that's who I am. And I don't expect all of you or even most of you to agree with me, but I'm listening to you, you're listening to me, and that's where I am. So I don't know, Priya, if that answers your query, but that's the way I feel about it. Priya?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Priya. So we are going to conclude in a minute. We have Parshadi Jannath to have a few words of our gratitude to Professor Richard Schechner. And there is a small announcement tomorrow. Our session with David Sindo begins exactly at 7 p.m. Indian time and 3:30 p.m. Tel Aviv time. And I greatly appreciate PJ Thomas's work in bringing our dear master of performance studies and theater, modern theater, Richard, to our webinar. And Parshadi,
can
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Professor Richard Schechner, for such an invigorating session. It was an honor for us to have you with us today. And I'm sure all the participants in this session who have joined us from across the world, across time zones, they have benefited from this session immensely. And it has definitely urged us to think in terms of performance, contemporary theater. In fact, a huge spectrum from, as you said, from Natyashastra to asteroids. So it has been a pretty long spectrum. And especially during the pandemic crisis, when all of us are living in a challenging time, I must say this was such a hope-inducing session for all of us. And at the same time, reminding us that we have to be responsible towards the environment and nature. Thank you once again on behalf of CFRAXIS and the participants here for sparing your time and energy for this communion with us, for this amazing session. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you and wish all of you a fabulous time gathering. I wish I could read all of the chats and things. I don't know if you recorded this session. In a way, I should have said, please do, because then you could send it out to people. If you did, you have my permission to send it out. If you didn't, it will live in our memories. And I wish you each and every one the very, very best. Namaste.